Have you ever felt the quiet urge to simply step away, not out of anger, not as an escape, but as an act of sacred return? I'm not talking about vanishing or cutting people off. I mean something much more subtle, much more profound, like detaching gently and deliberately from the invisible threads that tie you to roles, expectations, and emotional currents that no longer feel like home. What if, for once, you walked away, not because you were wounded, but because you were waking up? Most people wouldn't understand that. To them, stepping back looks like absence. Silence feels like punishment. But when you're walking a path of inner truth, you learn that distance can be devotion, that pulling away isn't abandonment, it's alignment, and that sometimes the most honest way to love is from afar, from a place that doesn't cost you yourself. Because there's something that happens when you stop showing up the way they expect you to. The energy shifts, the mask falls, and what's left behind is not just your absence, it's their own unexamined need. You were never just a person to them. You were a mirror. And now that you're gone, they're forced to look at their own reflection without your presence to soften the glare. It's not just that they miss you, it's that your absence disturbs something deeper. It reveals the parts of them that were leaning on you to avoid themselves. When you walk away, it doesn't just leave a space, it reveals the illusion that had been filling it. Your presence was never neutral. It carried weight, and your withdrawal becomes a kind of silent reckoning. This is the uncomfortable truth. People don't love you for who you truly are. Most love you for who you allow them to believe you are. They mold you in the image of their needs, their stories, their comfort zones. And when you step outside of that mold, when you stop performing, the illusion dies. And with it, their sense of control. But don't let this make you bitter. Let it make you sacred. Let it remind you of the divine responsibility you carry, not to others' projections, but to your own soul. You were not born to be everything to everyone. You were born to be whole. And wholeness sometimes requires solitude, silence, a holy kind of disappearing where you finally hear the voice that never lied to you, your own. You see, walking away isn't about rejection. It's about remembrance. It's about remembering who you were before you became what they needed. It's about stepping out of the performance and reclaiming your divine right to simply be. Not useful, not agreeable, not perfect. Just being in your fullness without needing to explain why your light no longer fits into their dim rooms. Yes, it will unsettle them. Yes, some will call you distant, cold, selfish. But what they're really feeling is the loss of control, the grief of a role no longer played, the echo of a silence that speaks louder than the noise of your old compliance. Let it echo. Let the silence expand. Let them sit with the absence and call it what it really is, truth unveiled. And while they sit with that discomfort, you will sit with something greater. You will sit with yourself, with your breath, with the quiet beauty of your own essence returning home. Because in the end, walking away isn't about leaving others behind. It's about walking toward the sacred. It's about returning to the temple within the one that was desecrated every time you silenced your truth for the sake of harmony. The one that still stands patiently waiting for your presence. So take the space, not as a rebellion, but as a prayer. Not as punishment, but as permission. Give yourself the gift of distance, not to isolate, but to integrate. Let the world feel your absence, and let your soul feel your return. Because some journeys don't begin with a step forward, they begin with a step away. They're like a mirror, not a clean one, but a distorted, fragile surface that reflects more of their insecurities than your essence. You don't just stand there being yourself. You unknowingly become their emotional scaffolding. Their idea of you, their expectations of you, their needs projected onto you, all of that becomes a construction they rely on. And when you step back, that fragile mirror cracks. They don't just feel your absence. They're forced to face the shattering image of who they thought you were. And it's not just loss they feel, it's confrontation. With themselves, with their dependencies, with the emotional weight they had quietly placed on your shoulders without ever asking if you could carry it. Think about how often you've heard phrases like, "You're so important to me," or "I don't know what I'd do without you." They sound loving on the surface, don't they? But look deeper. Those words often say more about them than about you. They're rarely about honoring your soul. They're about preserving their comfort. You became the emotional placeholder they never wanted to examine too closely. And when you withdraw, that placeholder disappears. The illusion dies, and they're left staring at a hole they didn't even know existed. At first it feels subtle, like a shift in the air. They can't quite name it. But underneath the surface, something starts to unravel. It begins as discomfort. Then it turns into tension, maybe even irritation, guilt, fear, and eventually, if they're honest enough, emptiness. But not because you left them, because they're left alone with the parts of themselves they've spent a lifetime avoiding. And here's the soul-stirring truth. The moment you remove your energy, they have no choice but to feel their own. That's the great paradox. You walk away in silence, and suddenly the silence becomes deafening, not for you, but for them. Because, for the first time, they're not being held. Not emotionally stabilized by your empathy, not quietly affirmed by your presence. And it terrifies them. Not because they love you deeply, but because they can no longer use you as a distraction from their own healing. Isn't that a strange realization? That sometimes people hold on to you not out of love, but out of fear. Fear of being alone. Fear of feeling. Fear of seeing themselves without the emotional buffer you've always been. That's not intimacy. That's dependency dressed up as devotion. And it's heartbreaking because you may have genuinely cared. You may have wanted real connection, real presence, real exchange. But what you gave became a tool for someone else's avoidance. And when you start to awaken to that dynamic, it hurts not just because of the role you played, but because of how willingly you played it, not knowing what it cost you. But this awareness is liberation. When you see it for what it is, you don't have to carry it anymore. You don't have to keep being the mirror. You don't have to keep reflecting back what they refuse to see in themselves. That sacred step back, no matter how quiet, no matter how misunderstood, becomes an act of truth. It becomes a boundary, not made of bitterness, but of wisdom. And in doing so, you offer them something more powerful than your presence, the opportunity to meet themselves. And whether they take that opportunity or not is no longer your concern. Your work is not to be a mirror. Your work is to become a soul that no longer fragments itself to keep others whole. When you finally step away, it forces people to confront something they've been avoiding. Their attachment wasn't to you, but to the idea of you. What you represented, the comfort you brought, the role you played. And when that image disappears, something breaks. At first, they'll say they feel sad, disappointed, even angry. But what they're actually feeling is harder to define. It's not pain like a wound. It's not grief like a loss. It's an emptiness without a shape, a mirror with no reflection. And it scares them. Why? Because your absence leaves space, and in that space their shadows rise. You were the distraction, the emotional buffer. Without you, the questions they've buried come to the surface. Who am I without your presence? What was I leaning on you to avoid? And here's the unsettling truth. Many relationships are not built on true connection, but on mutual avoidance. We become mirrors for each other's unhealed parts. When one person steps away, the illusion collapses. The mask falls. And what's left is raw discomfort. But stepping away is not cruel. It's necessary. It reveals what was real and what was projection. And yes, it shakes people, because it takes their internal chaos and reflects it back at them. This isn't a gentle process. It's disruptive. But it's also clarifying, because in that silence, the truth finally speaks. And when you choose that truth over convenience, you don't just change your life. You change the dynamic for everyone around you. Some people genuinely don't know how to live without your presence. And that becomes clear the moment you step back. Suddenly, they start rewriting your story not based on who you truly are, but based on what they're losing. They rewrite you not to understand, but to protect themselves. It's easier to reshape the story than confront the truth of your absence. They search for clues, reasons, excuses. But here's the truth. They're not trying to understand you. They're trying to protect themselves. Your decision to walk away forces them to ask a question they've been avoiding. How much of my emotional balance depended on someone else? That question is heavy, especially for people who pride themselves on being independent, strong, and unbothered. It reveals something deeply human, but hard to admit they were leaning on you more than they realized. And when they don't know how to process that, they rewrite the script. Not because you changed, but because they need to change the story to survive it. Some turn you into a hero. Your absence makes them see you as someone sacred, untouchable. But others, they turn you into the villain. That's their defense mechanism. It's easier to call you selfish than to admit they were emotionally dependent. It's easier to say you betrayed them than to face the truth they lost balance when you stepped away. What's fascinating is that everyone feels your absence differently. For some, it's like a fresh wound, sharp, raw, undeniable. For others, it reopens scars they thought were healed. And for a few, it's something even deeper, a mirror. A reflection of their deepest fear of being alone with their thoughts without distraction. But here's where it gets even more complex. These reactions aren't static. They evolve. At first, you might see anger, then confusion, maybe silence. But underneath it all is something more honest: grief. Not just for losing you, but for losing the illusion they built around you. But over time, your absence starts to shift from something personal to something existential. It no longer feels like just you being gone. It becomes a question they can't answer. Did I ever truly know you? Or was I just projecting what I needed you to be? That kind of doubt cuts deep. Because now your leaving isn't just about distance, it's about a loss of control. And losing control shakes people. It makes them anxious, restless, confused. They may not have seen you as central to their life, but now they're forced to reckon with just how much of their emotional structure leaned on you silently, subtly, but consistently. You didn't seem like a big presence, but now that you're gone, the room feels different. The silence is louder, and suddenly, all the cracks they once ignored are now visible. Those cracks were always there. Your absence didn't cause them, it simply turned on the light. That's why it stings. Not because you hurt them, but because your decision forced them to see themselves without your buffering presence. And that's what makes stepping back such a powerful act. It tests the integrity of everything left behind. Because here's the raw truth. Many relationships aren't built on love or respect. They're built on familiarity, emotional convenience, and unconscious agreements. You play a role. They play a role. And everyone feels safe as long as no one changes the script. But the moment you do, the moment you stop playing your part, everything shifts. It's not just about losing you. It's about losing the emotional support system they didn't even realize you provided. You were a frame of reference, a stabilizer, a silent presence that made things feel normal. And now, without you, they have to ask a hard question. Who am I when you're not here to reflect me back to myself? For some, the answer is simple. They move on, find new distractions, rebuild. But for others, your absence lingers. Not because they can't live without you, but because they're forced to live with parts of themselves they've never faced. That's the hidden cost of walking away. You don't just leave a space, you reveal the truth of what that space was hiding. It leaves a gap they don't know how to fill, because without realizing it, you had become a quiet support beam holding up parts of their emotional structure. And now that structure is starting to shift, even collapse. The most unexpected part. Your decision to step back doesn't just impact them, it affects you too. But that's another story. Today we're looking at how your absence shakes the ground beneath others, often in ways they can't put into words. At first, they don't notice the shift. The surface seems calm, but underneath, something starts moving. Your absence lands like silent thunder, no explosion, no drama, just a low rumbling force that changes things over time. They may not talk about it. They may pretend it's no big deal. But something inside begins to shift. The first stage is denial. They tell themselves, you're just busy, that it's temporary, that you'll be back eventually. They repeat it like a mantra just to stay balanced. But somewhere deep down, they know something's different. And that uncertainty, the not knowing, is what begins to unravel them. Then the questions come. Did I do something wrong? Was I too much? Did I take them for granted? Those thoughts don't go away. They multiply. Quietly. Daily. And with them comes anxiety not about losing you, but about losing a version of themselves that only existed with you in the picture. See, when you spend time with someone, your energies blend. Even if the connection was never defined, you still become part of their rhythm. Your presence reshapes their habits, their thoughts, even their identity. And when you step away, they're not just losing a person, they're losing a reflection, a version of themselves that only made sense when you were around. And that's where it gets even more complicated. Because now, they have to rewrite the past. They start remembering you not as you were, but in a way that fits the story they need to believe. Some romanticize you. They see you as the one who got away, the person they didn't appreciate enough. They place you on a pedestal, maybe out of guilt, maybe out of longing. Others go the opposite way. They paint you as cold, distant, selfish. The villain in their emotional narrative. That version feels safer, easier to blame than to admit loss. But then, there are the few. The rare, brave few. The ones who sit with the discomfort and say, maybe I didn't see them clearly. Maybe I didn't ask who they were, only what they could give me. Maybe I didn't listen. And when that happens, something sacred begins. Not just regret, but awakening. Not just grief, but growth. From a distance, you've become a question mark in their lives. A lingering thought they can't quite let go of. They wonder what you're doing if you ever think about them, or why you really walked away. That not knowing it eats at them. Not because they need closure, but because they've lost control. Your absence disrupted the story they were used to telling themselves, and disruption always brings chaos. But while they're busy trying to rebuild without you, here's what no one sees. You're also doing your own work, because stepping away isn't easy. It's not just a break. It's a brave reckoning with yourself. It's standing in front of the mirror and saying, I need to make space for me, even if it confuses everyone else. And that's courage. So if you're still here reading this, let me pause and speak to you directly. Maybe you've walked away from someone, or maybe someone walked away from you. Maybe everything feels like it's unraveling, or maybe you're just starting to realize how much of your peace depends on people who were never meant to hold it. Whatever your story is, I want to offer this. Let go not to escape, but to return to yourself. Let silence be your sanctuary. Let distance be your clarity. And if this message hits something deep, I want you to write this in the comments below. The void doesn't define me. It frees me. Say it for yourself. Own it. Let it be a small declaration of your healing. And if you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Here, we don't run from the uncomfortable stuff. We face it. We talk about the hard things, emotions, boundaries, identity, self-worth. Because growth doesn't live in the light. It lives in the shadows we dare to explore. And before you click away, hear this. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is let go. Not to punish them, but to show them they can grow without you. Because real love isn't about holding on. It's about becoming whole, even if it means doing it apart. So stay with us. What comes next isn't just reflection, it's transformation. And it might just change how you see your relationships, your choices, and most importantly, yourself.